There is a persistent legend regarding the death of Kodak. It claims that in 1975, a young engineer invented the first digital camera, only for executives to bury the project to protect their film empire. This chart shows the scale of their monopoly. In 1976, Kodak controlled 90% of the film sector and 85% of all camera sales in the United States. At this height, the company functioned as a cultural institution. It was the primary curator of human memory, responsible for how millions of families captured and archived their lives. That trust was built on founder George Eastman's original mission to strip away complex 19th-century chemistry and make photography accessible to the average person. However, the internet rumor of a malicious cover-up is largely false. The failure wasn't a conspiracy to hide technology, it was a psychological trap that eventually split the company in two. Kodak's story is a case study in why market leaders are so frequently destroyed by the specific innovations they helped pioneer. Steve Sassen's 1975 prototype was hardly an immediate threat to the film industry. It was the size of a toaster, took 23 seconds to record a 5-kilobyte image to a cassette tape, and required a television set for playback. The resolution was so low that Sassen himself estimated it would take at least 15 years for digital sensors to match the clarity of traditional film. Kodak followed that timeline closely. By the 1990s, they were investing billions into the transition, even manufacturing the internal hardware for early consumer devices like Apple's QuickTake. Despite these investments, they couldn't fully pivot because of the sunk cost fallacy. This is the tendency to keep investing in a failing strategy simply because of the resources already spent on it. For Kodak, those sunk costs were physical. They owned a massive global infrastructure of chemical plants and paper mills, assets that were worth billions only as long as people kept buying physical film. Their century of success had created a physical and psychological anchor. They were so invested in the world they built that they became unable to inhabit the one that was coming. This line graph illustrates the innovator's dilemma. The high plateau shows the massive profit margins of chemical film. The lower line shows digital photography, an emerging market with much tighter margins. Kodak hesitated to embrace digital because it meant cannibalizing their own high-profit sales. That hesitation was fatal. When consumer demand for film finally plummeted, the company's primary source of cash evaporated, while the digital line spiked. Competitors like Canon and Sony moved into the gap immediately. Because they didn't have a legacy film business to protect, they could focus entirely on dominating the new digital landscape. The resulting financial collapse was a decade-long decline that ended in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing in 2012. The company wasn't out-innovated by its rivals, it was paralyzed by its own previous success. Coming out of bankruptcy, the company was burdened by a $2.8 billion claim from its United Kingdom Employee Pension Fund. To settle this debt, the brand split into two separate corporate nodes. Eastman Kodak retained the manufacturing side, owning the factories and chemical patents. Kodak Alaris handles the consumer brand and retail sales, with profits settling the UK pension obligations. This division created a confusing market where the company making the film and the company selling the film are separate entities with different owners. In recent years, a massive cultural resurgence in analog photography has made Kodak's legacy relevant again, particularly with younger photographers. This has led to a new corporate struggle, as Kodak Alaris was recently sold off to a private equity firm. Now the original manufacturer, Eastman Kodak, is finding legal avenues to bypass Alaris and sell film directly to consumers, trying to reclaim their brand. While the corporation struggled, the engineering behind it was eventually validated. In 2009, Steve Sassen received the National Medal of Technology for the digital imaging system he had pioneered decades earlier. The Kodak story suggests that a company's past successes can eventually become its fatal liabilities. Survival depends on the willingness to dismantle a profitable present to make room for an uncertain future.